There are some people in this world who remind us that fame does not have to change the heart. Keanu Reeves is one of those rare souls. For years, I have watched him move through Hollywood with a quietness that feels almost impossible in a world of loud voices and desperate attention. He gives away money without telling anyone. He sits on subway benches and offers his seat to strangers. He hugs crew members after long days of filming and remembers their names years later. He has known loss that would break most people, yet he still chooses kindness every single day. That is why Keanu Reeves inspires me. Not because he is a movie star, but because he is a human being who never forgot how to be human. And today, I want to share a story with you. It is a story about love, patience, and the words that made an entire room cry. It is a story about Keanu and the woman who stood beside him when the world finally saw his heart. So stay with me until the very end, because this story might just change the way you see everything. The evening air felt different somehow. There was a softness in the way the light touched the windows of the grand hall, a golden glow that seemed to slow everything down. Inside, hundreds of guests moved between tables dressed in white cloth and fresh flowers, but there was something underneath the music and the laughter. It was a feeling that could not be named yet. It was the kind of stillness that arrives before something important happens, the way the sky holds its breath before the first drop of rain. Keanu Reeves stood near the edge of the room, his hands resting gently at his sides, and for a moment he did not move. He was watching the crowd, but his eyes were not really seeing them. Something was pulling at him from the inside, a strange weight that had no shape or reason. This was the annual Artists for Change Gala, one of the most respected charity events in the country. It brought together painters, musicians, writers, and filmmakers who believed that art could heal the world. Keanu had been invited many times before, but this year felt different. The invitation had come with unusual urgency, and when he arrived, people looked at him in ways he could not quite understand. There were smiles, yes, but also whispers, glances that lingered a little too long. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself he was imagining things, but deep down he knew something was waiting for him tonight. Alexandra Grant walked toward him from across the room. She moved with calm grace, her silver hair catching the light like moonlight on still water. She had known Keanu for more than 20 years, first as a collaborator on books they created together, then as something deeper. Their love had grown slowly, like roots beneath the earth, strong and quiet and patient. She did not need the world to understand what they had. She only needed him. And tonight she could see that he was unsettled. She reached his side and placed her hand gently on his arm. She did not ask what was wrong. She simply stood with him, and somehow that was enough. A server approached them with a silver tray. On it was a single envelope, cream-colored and sealed with dark wax. Keanu looked at it for a long moment before reaching out to take it. His name was written on the front in handwriting he did not recognize. The server offered no explanation, only a polite nod before disappearing into the crowd. Alexandra watched as Keanu turned the envelope over in his hands. His fingers hesitated at the seal. There was no reason to feel nervous, and yet his heart began to beat a little faster. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single card with words printed in simple black ink. It read, "Tonight the world will learn the truth about you." There was no signature, no explanation, just those 9 words sitting on the paper like a quiet threat. Keanu read them twice, then a third time. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Alexandra leaned closer and read the message over his shoulder. She felt his body tense slightly, and she squeezed his arm in response. Whoever sent this wanted to create fear, but she refused to let it take hold. Around them, the gala continued as if nothing had happened. Guests laughed and raised their glasses. A jazz band played softly in the corner. But for Keanu, the room had changed. Every face now seemed to hold a secret. Every conversation felt like it might be about him. He thought about all the things he had done in his life, the mistakes he had made, the pain he had carried alone. He thought about the public image he had never asked for and the private man he had always tried to protect. What truth could they possibly reveal? What did they know that he did not want the world to see? Alexandra guided him toward a quiet corner near the tall windows. The city lights glittered below them, distant and beautiful. She looked into his eyes and spoke softly. She told him that whatever this was, they would face it together. She reminded him that he had survived worse than a mysterious note. She told him that the people who truly knew him would never believe anything that was not true. and for a moment, Keanu allowed himself to breathe. He looked at her and saw everything he had spent his whole life searching for. Peace, understanding, a love that did not demand or perform. She was his home. But before he could respond, the lights in the hall dimmed slightly. The music faded. A voice came through the speakers, calm and clear. It announced that there would be an unexpected addition to the program tonight. A special speaker had requested time on stage, someone with a story the audience needed to hear. Keanu felt his stomach tighten. He looked at Alexandra and she looked back at him with steady eyes. Whatever was coming, they would not run from it. The room turned toward the stage. Keanu turned with them. And in that moment, standing in the golden light with the woman he loved beside him, he realized that tonight was not about fear. It was about truth. He just did not know yet whose truth it would be. The murmur of the crowd grew quiet as a young woman stepped onto the stage. She could not have been older than 30, with dark hair pulled back and a nervous strength in her posture. Keanu did not recognize her face, but something about the way she stood made him feel like he should. She carried a small remote in her hand, and behind her a large screen flickered to life. The image it displayed was simple, just a single photograph of a film set from many years ago. Keanu stared at it and felt time begin to fold in on itself. He knew that set. He had walked those floors. He had lived through something painful in those walls, and now it was staring back at him from across the room. The young woman spoke into the microphone with a voice that trembled only slightly. She introduced herself as Maria, a documentary filmmaker who had spent the last several years working on a project she never intended to share publicly. She explained that her mother had been a crew member on one of Keanu's films nearly 15 years ago. She paused and looked directly at him from the stage. Her eyes were not filled with anger or accusation. They were filled with something closer to gratitude. And that confused him more than anything else. The screen changed to show old footage. It was grainy, recorded on personal cameras and cell phones from another era. The first clip showed Keanu on set, not acting, but talking with a woman who held a clipboard. She was laughing at something he said. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Rosa Delgado, Production Assistant, 2009. Keanu felt his chest tighten. He remembered Rosa. She had worked on one of his action films during a time when his own life had been falling apart. He remembered how tired she always looked, how she stayed late every night, how she once told him she was working 3 jobs just to pay for her daughter's school. The footage continued. It showed Keanu handing Rosa an envelope one evening after the rest of the crew had gone home. The clip had no sound, but the image was clear. Rosa opened the envelope and her hands began to shake. She looked at Keanu with wide eyes, and he simply nodded and walked away. Maria's voice returned through the speakers. She explained that the envelope had contained a check large enough to pay off her mother's medical debt and cover 2 years of Maria's college tuition. Keanu had never told anyone. He had never asked for thanks. He had simply seen someone struggling and decided to help. In the audience, people began to whisper. Keanu felt heat rising to his face. He had never wanted this to be known. He had done it because it was right, not because he wanted recognition. Alexandra reached for his hand and held it tightly. She knew him well enough to understand that this moment was not easy for him. Being seen was something he had always resisted. But she also knew that some truths needed to be shared, not for his sake, but for the sake of others who needed to believe that goodness still existed. Screen continued to show more clips. Each one was a different moment from a different year. There was footage of Keanu sitting on a bench with a homeless man, sharing a sandwich and listening to his story for nearly an hour. There was a photograph of him helping a stranded driver change a tire on the side of a highway. There was a video of him standing in the rain outside a hospital, waiting with a crew member whose wife was in surgery. He had stayed for 7 hours. He never once looked at his phone. He never once complained. Maria explained that she had spent years collecting these moments. She had spoken with dozens of people whose lives Keanu had touched without ever expecting anything in return. She had gathered their stories, their photographs, their memories. She had done this not to invade his privacy, but to remind the world that real kindness does not perform for cameras. It simply exists quietly in the spaces where no one is watching. But the documentary was not just about Keanu's kindness. It was also about his pain. The screen shifted to older footage, news clips from decades past. They showed the loss of his best friend. They showed the tragedy that took his child and ended his engagement. They showed years of grief that he carried alone while the world only saw the movie star. Maria's voice softened as she spoke about how her mother had once found Keanu sitting alone in a dark corner of the set, his head in his hands, crying silently. Rosa had not said anything. She had simply sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. And in that moment, two strangers had shared something that words could never capture. Keanu watched the screen with still eyes. The memories washed over him like waves against a tired shore. He had spent so many years trying to move forward, trying to be strong, trying to give more than he took. And now all of it was being laid bare in front of a room full of strangers. He did not know if he wanted to run or stay. He did not know if this was a gift or a wound being reopened. Alexandra leaned close to him and whispered something only he could hear. She told him that this was not an attack. This was the world finally seeing what she had always seen. A man who never stopped caring, even when life gave him every reason to become cold. She told him that he did not have to carry his story alone anymore. And for the first time that night, Keanu felt something loosen inside his chest. But then Maria said something that made the entire room go silent. She said that before the documentary played, she wanted to offer Keanu the chance to speak first. She said that she had not come here to tell his story for him. She had come here to give him the stage, the moment, the space to share his own words with the people who admired him. The spotlight slowly moved from the screen to the place where Keanu stood. Every eye in the room turned toward him. The silence was so deep it felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. Alexandra looked at him. The crowd looked at him. And Keanu Reeves, a man who had spent his entire life avoiding the spotlight outside of his work, now faced a choice he could not walk away from. Would he speak, or would he let the silence answer for him? The spotlight felt warm against his skin, but the warmth did not reach the coldness that had settled in his chest. Keanu stood completely still, his feet rooted to the floor as if the weight of every eye in the room had turned to stone around his ankles. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, steady but loud, drowning out the soft rustle of fabric and the distant clink of glasses. The silence stretched and stretched, pulling tighter with each passing second. He had faced cameras his entire adult life. He had delivered lines written by brilliant minds. He had pretended to be heroes and villains and lovers and broken men. But this was different. This was not a role. This was him, just him, and he did not know if he had the words. Alexandra watched him from where she stood, her hand still reaching toward the space where his had been moments ago. She did not move toward him. She did not call out. She understood that this was a bridge he had to decide to cross on his own. All she could do was stand there, steady and sure, a quiet reminder that he was not alone even when he felt like he was. Her presence was like a candle in a dark room, small but enough to see by. And Keanu, even in the fog of his hesitation, could feel her light. Maria remained on the stage, the microphone still in her hand, her eyes soft with patience. She had not planned to put him on the spot like this, but something in her heart had told her that this moment was necessary. Her mother had spoken of Keanu so often over the years, always with a kind of reverence that Maria had not fully understood until she began her research. Now she understood. Now she knew that some people carry their goodness so quietly that the world almost misses it entirely. And she believed, with everything in her, that Keanu deserved the chance to be heard in his own voice. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Keanu began to move. His first step was uncertain, like a man testing the ground after an earthquake. But the second step was stronger, and the third, and the fourth. The crowd parted gently as he walked toward the stage, their faces a blur of curiosity and compassion. He could feel their attention like a physical pressure, but he did not look at any of them. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the small set of stairs that led up to the platform where Maria waited. When he reached the stage, Maria offered him the microphone with both hands, a gesture of respect and trust. Keanu looked at it for a long moment before accepting it. The metal was cool against his palm. He turned to face the audience and saw hundreds of faces looking back at him, waiting, hoping, holding their breath. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The silence returned, thicker than before. Somewhere in the back of the room, a woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Somewhere else, a man leaned forward in his seat, afraid to miss a single word. And then, finally, Keanu spoke. His voice was low and rough, carrying the texture of years and miles and sleepless nights. He did not begin with a greeting or a joke or a polished opening line. He simply said that he did not know why he was standing there. He said that he had spent most of his life trying to disappear into his work, trying to let the characters he played speak louder than the man behind them. He said that he had never been comfortable with attention, never been good at accepting praise, never known how to stand in the light without wanting to step back into the shadows. He paused and looked down at the floor. When he looked up again, his eyes were glistening. He said that the footage Maria had shown was not something he ever expected to see. He said that those moments, those small acts of connection, had not felt special to him at the time. They had just felt like the right thing to do. He said that when you have lost people you love, when you have felt the kind of emptiness that makes you wonder if you will ever feel whole again, you start to understand that kindness is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is the thread that keeps us all connected when everything else falls apart. The room was utterly silent. No one moved. No one whispered. Every person in that hall was suspended in the gravity of his words, feeling something shift inside them that they could not name. Keanu continued. He said that for a long time he believed he was meant to walk through life alone. He said that he had convinced himself that love was something that happened to other people, something he had lost the right to after so much pain. He said that he had built walls so high that even he could not see over them anymore. And then he stopped. He turned slightly and looked toward the place where Alexandra stood. The spotlight followed his gaze, illuminating her silver hair and calm expression. She did not flinch or look away. She simply met his eyes with a steadiness that spoke louder than any words. Keanu said her name softly, almost like a prayer. Alexandra. The way he said it made something tremble in the air. He said that she had come into his life like a quiet storm, changing everything without demanding anything. He said that she had never asked him to be more than he was. She had never tried to fix him or finish him or fill the spaces he thought were empty. She had simply walked beside him, day after day, year after year, until one morning he woke up and realized that the walls he had built were no longer standing. He said that she taught him something he had forgotten. She taught him that love is not about rescuing someone or being rescued. It is about presence. It is about showing up again and again, even when it is hard. It is about holding space for someone's pain without trying to take it away. It is about believing in someone so completely that they start to believe in themselves. His voice broke slightly on the last words. He lowered the microphone for a moment and took a breath. When he raised it again, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. He said that he had not planned to say any of this tonight. He said that he did not know if he was saying it right. But he needed the world to know that if there was any goodness in him, any kindness worth remembering, it was because of the people who had loved him through his darkest days. And standing at the top of that list, shining brighter than anyone else, was Alexandra Grant. The audience remained frozen, caught between tears and breath. And then from somewhere near the back, a single person began to clap. The sound was soft at first, almost hesitant. But it grew. Another pair of hands joined, then another, until the entire room was filled with applause that felt less like celebration and more like healing. But Keanu was not finished. He raised his hand gently, asking for silence. The applause faded. He looked once more at Alexandra, then back at the audience. He said that there was one more thing he needed to say, one more truth he had carried for too long. And just as he opened his mouth to continue, the lights in the hall flickered. Once, twice, then went completely dark. For a moment the darkness was absolute. It swallowed the room whole, erasing the faces and the flowers and the glittering chandeliers. Keanu stood frozen on the stage, the microphone still pressed to his chest, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could hear gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd, the nervous shuffling of feet, the scrape of chairs against the floor. Somewhere in the distance, a child began to cry. The sound cut through the confusion like a small bright light, reminding everyone that they were still human, still connected, still together in the dark. And then, just as quickly as they had gone out, the lights returned. They flickered back to life one by one, soft and golden, casting long shadows across the hall. Keanu blinked against the sudden brightness. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Alexandra. She was still standing in the same place, her hand pressed gently against her heart, her expression calm but curious. She nodded at him, a small gesture that said everything without saying anything at all. "Keep going. I am here. You are not alone." Keanu turned back to the audience. The interruption had shaken something loose inside him. A final wall he had not even known was still standing. He realized in that moment that he had spent so much of his life waiting for the right time, the right words, the right conditions. But life did not wait. Life flickered and faded and returned without warning, and if he did not speak now, he might never speak at all. He raised the microphone again and took a slow breath. He said that he had been carrying something for a long time, something he had never shared with anyone except the woman standing in the back of the room. He said that years ago, after the losses that had broken him in ways he still did not fully understand, he had made a decision. He had decided that he would spend the rest of his life giving more than he took. He had decided that if he could not save the people he loved, he would try to save as many strangers as he could. Not in big dramatic ways, but in small quiet moments that no one would ever see. He said that he had given away money, yes, but that was never the point. The point was presence. The point was paying attention. The point was seeing the person in front of you and treating them like they mattered, because they did. Every crew member who worked 18-hour days to make his films possible. Every fan who waited in the rain just to say hello. Every stranger on the street who looked like they needed someone to notice them. He said that kindness was not about being a hero. It was about being awake. It was about choosing, again and again, to see the world through soft eyes instead of hard ones. His voice grew quieter, more intimate, as if he were speaking to each person in the room individually. He said that he had learned this lesson the hard way. He had learned it through grief and loneliness and years of wondering if he would ever feel whole again. He had learned it in hospital rooms and on empty film sets and in the silence of his own home late at night. And he had learned it, most of all, from Alexandra. He turned to look at her again. This time he did not just glance. He held her gaze and let the whole room see what was passing between them. He said that when he met her, he was still broken. He was still hiding. He was still pretending that he did not need anyone, that he could carry the weight of his life alone. But she saw through all of that. She saw the man behind the walls, the heart behind the silence, the hope behind the fear, and she did not run away. He said that she taught him that love is not about finding someone who completes you. It is about finding someone who sees you clearly and chooses to stay anyway. It is about patience and presence and the courage to be vulnerable even when it hurts. It is about building something together day by day without needing it to look perfect or feel easy. She taught him that he was worthy of love, not because of what he had achieved, but because of who he was. The room had gone completely still. No one moved. No one whispered. Tears were streaming down faces throughout the hall, catching the light like tiny rivers of gold. Maria stood at the edge of the stage, her hand pressed over her mouth, her eyes shining with emotion she could not contain. Even the servers had stopped moving, frozen in place by the weight of what they were witnessing. Keanu said that he did not share all of this to receive praise or applause. He shared it because he believed that everyone in the room, everyone watching, everyone who had ever felt alone or broken or unworthy, needed to hear one simple truth. He said that we are all carrying invisible weights. We are all fighting battles that no one else can see. And the greatest gift we can give each other is not advice or solutions or grand gestures. It is simply the gift of being seen. He said that if he had one wish for the world, it would be this: that we would all slow down long enough to notice each other, that we would put away our phones and our distractions and our endless lists of things to do, that we would look into the eyes of the people we love and tell them not tomorrow, not someday, but right now that they matter, that they are enough, that they are not alone. His voice cracked on the last word. He lowered the microphone and stood there for a moment, exposed and vulnerable and more honest than he had ever been in public. And then, slowly, he stepped down from the stage and walked through the crowd toward Alexandra. The audience parted for him like water around a stone. No one spoke. No one reached out to touch him. They simply watched, holding their breath, as he crossed the room and stopped in front of the woman who had changed his life. Alexandra looked up at him with eyes that held no judgment, no expectation, only love. And Keanu, without saying a word, reached out and took her hands in his. They stood there together, two people who had found each other after years of searching, two hearts that had learned to beat in the same quiet rhythm. And then Keanu did something that surprised everyone. He pulled her into an embrace, right there in front of hundreds of strangers, and held her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. The applause that followed was not like any applause the room had ever heard. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if people were afraid to break the spell. But it grew and grew until it filled every corner of the hall, a wave of sound that was part celebration, part release, part collective exhale. People were crying openly now, strangers hugging strangers, old wounds being gently touched and acknowledged. Maria stepped back to the microphone and spoke through her own tears. She said that she had spent years making this documentary because she believed the world needed to see what real kindness looked like. But she had never imagined that the story would end like this. She said that Keanu had given everyone in the room a gift far greater than any film or photograph. He had given them permission to be human, to be vulnerable, to love without fear. She said that her mother, Rosa, had passed away 2 years ago. But before she died, she had told Maria one thing that she never forgot. She had said that Keanu Reeves was proof that fame does not have to change the heart, that success does not have to make you hard, that the world is not as dark as it sometimes seems, because there are still people who choose light again and again and again. The gala continued long into the night. People shared stories and laughter and tears. Keanu and Alexandra moved through the crowd together, hand in hand, accepting hugs and words of gratitude with grace and humility. But the moment that everyone would remember, the moment that would be talked about for years to come, was not the documentary or the applause or the standing ovation. It was the sight of a man who had every reason to become bitter, choosing instead to become kind. It was the sight of a woman who had stood beside him through it all, asking nothing, giving everything. It was the reminder that love, real love, is not loud or dramatic or desperate for attention. It is quiet and steady and patient. It is showing up again and again, even when no one is watching. And that is the lesson of this story. Kindness is a choice we make every single day. It is not about grand gestures or public recognition. It is about the small moments, the quiet acts of presence, the willingness to see the people around us and treat them with respect. It is about understanding that everyone is carrying something heavy and that even the smallest act of compassion can change the weight of someone's world. Keanu Reeves made everyone cry that night, not because he was famous, but because he was real. And in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, his words reminded us all that warmth still exists. It lives in the spaces between us, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be shared, waiting to remind us that we are never truly alone. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Do not wait for the perfect moment to tell someone you love them. Do not wait for permission to be kind. Do not wait for your pain to heal before you help someone else with theirs. Because life is short and unpredictable, and the only thing we can truly control is how we treat the people we meet along the way. Be like Keanu, be like Alexandra, choose kindness, choose presence, choose love. And never forget that the greatest thing you can give another person is the simple gift of being seen.